Hello and welcome to another Don't Get Me Going podcast. My name is Zoe Lulinski, and today, I know it's a little late, a couple weeks late. We're about 2 weeks out of the NFL draft, but I'm going to be going over to my draft takes, some of the bigger conversations. I needed some time to sit with what the Bears did, okay? And I'll show you my reaction. I feel much better about it now. So, just to get that out of the way, I did have to have some time and sit with all these picks, not even just the Bears, of course. All of them, I want to sit down, adjust, and just see. I think reacting right away, I mean, I'm going to have a different opinion after a week after the draft, 2 weeks after, a month even. Once the season starts, obviously I'll have different opinions. But I wanted to sit on it a little bit. I also had finals, so congratulate me, please, because I just finished my sophomore year of college. So, yay me. But without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to start off with just my draft winners, some losers. I'm also going to be going into my top 10 after the draft. And then please go check out on my TikTok and Instagram pages once they're released. I'm going to be doing individual episodes for every team of ranking all 32 teams post draft, just where I think they're gonna sit heading into the season. So please go check those out if you want to see more than just my main top 10 here on this podcast. But I'll get going. So to start with draft winners, I think number one, I have the Ravens. They got Malachi Starks and Mike Green fell to them. It's the Ravens and the Eagles. They always tend to have players that just fall to them. Malachi Starks is a really great safety. I think he's number one in the draft class, in my opinion. And then Mike Green was supposed to go probably, I'd say, top 15 in the draft class, and he fell to them way down on day two. So that's a steal for them there. Just upgrading the defense even more. That team is going to be unstoppable. I mean, with the offense that they already have with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, added some help on the offense there as well. So I think they're in a really good spot. And then going on to the Seahawks, I also think the Seahawks had a really good draft. I'm going to get more into the Jalen Milroe pick because I think a lot of these quarterbacks, while the quarterback class this year wasn't as good, I do find it super interesting. And I really like their pick with Jalen Milroe. But not to include that, they had 11 picks total, which is probably one of the most in the entire draft. So they had a lot of room to go there, a lot of potential with all the draft picks they were able to achieve there. Gray Zabel in the first round is a really solid offensive lineman pickup, especially where they were in the draft. At one point, there were a lot of offensive linemen falling off the board, just helping out that offense as much as they can with Sam Darnold at the center right now. And then Torrey Horton at receiver for them, I think, is a really solid option that they got. Day three, is it? They got late in the draft. He's a very shifty guy. I think they're going to put him at punt return or returner specialist in general. So trying to improve their special teams. I think he's a really solid pickup. No one's really talking about him. But getting into the Jalen Milroe situation, I think he's they got him round 3. After a couple other guys went, Tyler Schaff went before him, which I think is super surprising for his age. But Jalen Milroe, he is a guy like Jalen Hurts, and I think with obviously the NFL is going into a more running-based. Running is important for quarterbacks. I think they need to be able to get out of the pocket. Even quarterbacks that you see from last year, Jaden Daniels is absolute menace in the run game last year. That contributed to how good his rookie season was. Caleb Williams, you could see not even just with running ability in general, but being able to get out of the pocket. You saw that from many rookies last year, so that's obviously important. But he can have an impact even without playing and starting this year for the Seahawks, just being kind of a gadget player for them. That we've seen that with Justin Fields. We've seen that with a lot of younger quarterbacks coming into the league that might not be starting right away. I think we saw it with Michael Penix last year as well. So I really like that pickup, especially letting him sit a year or two after signing Sam Darnold. I think it's a really solid pickup there. And then the Browns. The Browns were one of my favorite drafts. Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, both the quarterbacks that they drafted. And then they also got Judkins and Dylan Sampson. Those are also two top 5 running backs in the draft class, in my opinion, and they got both of them. So completely revamped their offense there in the backfield, getting those 2 rookies, especially after losing Nick Chubb. I guess they kind of lost him 2 years ago after that injury, but replacing Nick Chubb with 2 rookies like this, they have lots of potential there. So I'm really liking it, capitalizing on the draft position that they had. And then, of course, you can't forget Mason Graham. As nice as it would have been for them to get Travis Hunter, they traded the 2 or 3 spots back and got Mason Graham and multiple picks out of that. Both of them are going to be blue chip players, in my opinion. So getting Mason Graham on the defensive side of the ball on that line, I mean, that line is going to be monstrous with Myles Garrett and Mason Graham. And then, like I mentioned, Dylan Gabriel. I mean, at the time, I thought they should have picked Shedeur Sanders, and their draft would be rated much lower for me if they didn't end up going and getting Shedeur Sanders. And of course, I had Shedeur Sanders going in the first, but at that point, I would have had them taking Shedeur Sanders there and maybe even taking Dylan Gabriel later. But they did end up with both of them. They're going to have a really weird quarterback battle, though. Like, that's what I find kind of weird, is that they wasted a pick on Kenny Pickett earlier this year to get him for whatever reason, and then drafted Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. I kind of think it's just a waste of assets. You only have so many options of players you can cut. They have like 6 quarterbacks on their roster right now. You can't cut Joe Flacco. He's like the only veteran they have there. Deshaun Watson's not going to be cut. He is too much money. Kenny Pickett is really the odd one out there. You can't cut or put Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders on the practice squad. They'll get taken right away. So I think they put themselves in a weird situation. I really don't know who's going to start. I'm actually really excited to see that quarterback battle play out. I think, if anything, you'd go with Joe Flacco at the beginning and let the quarterback sit. But Shedeur Sanders, I think he has a lot of potential to be able to start there right away. So I was really intrigued by their draft class, despite they had 5 picks total, if I'm looking at it right. But I really liked all of the picks. They kind of stole running backs from other teams in the league that might have wanted some as well. But the Eagles and Chiefs, I also want to shout out. I mean, at the end, just looking at their first round picks, Josh Simmons for the Chiefs at offensive line. I thought he was going to go way earlier, and then they somehow had him. They literally were able to even trade back a spot to 32 and still got Josh Simmons with doing no work. They just got one of the better offensive linemen in the draft. Of course they did. But the Eagles also did something pretty similar. They got Jahad Campbell, which is the best linebacker in the draft class, and they got him at 31, where I definitely had predicted him going higher up. Just things like that. The Eagles, like I mentioned earlier, the Eagles and Ravens just somehow tend to have those types of guys fall to them. I guess they did trade up with Jalen Carter, but a couple of the players they got last year, it's the same thing. These players are falling into the second rounds, whatever, later, and they're somehow getting them. That's why they're staying good. I mean, obviously more than that, but I'll get more into those 2 teams later. They're both my top 10. So, Patriots are also another good pick. I love Will Campbell. I was at the draft and seeing his speech or interview live afterwards. It was an emotional interview after he got drafted, and it was really cool to see. I mean, he seems like an awesome guy. He's the type of guy you want protecting you. He said he's willing to die to protect Drake May. I think that's actually awesome. Pretty old school. I miss that in football. I mean, obviously, I'm 20 years old, so it's not like I saw it live, but just, the hardcoreness of what football used to be. And again, getting back into the Patriots, though, Will Campbell, Travion Henderson, 2 really solid picks on offense there, and even Kyle Williams. Their first 4 picks in general were all offensive players, which I think is really showing where they're targeting. I mean, they to do anything to improve, they have to improve that offense, because it was one of the bottom offenses in the league last year, and you have a second-year quarterback. You have to improve that. So getting Stephon Diggs in free agency, and then targeting running backs like Travion Henderson, and getting offensive line help in Will Campbell is really solid. And then Braden Swinson, I think, is a pretty solid defensive option there that they went with. So I think they had a really good draft all around. And then any safety that has the last name Woodson is going to be pretty good. Charles Woodson, ring a bell. So that was a joke, but I think he has potential as well. And then last but not least, I do think the Bears had a pretty solid draft. I think they reached a little bit here and there in the first round. I don't think it was as much of a reach as we initially predicted. They got one of the top tight ends in the draft and a top wide receiver who fell out of the first round. I kind of had him at a low first, maybe high to middle second, but I think he's a really solid option. However, the only thing that trips me up a little bit is that their 2 top needs coming to the draft were running back and defensive line edge, and they did not touch on running back until the 7th round. They had opportunities, they just decided not to go for it. I mean, they kept trading down later on in the draft on day 2 and day 3. They were traded down, and they just missed out on the remaining running backs that could have an immediate impact. Cam Scatabo went right before the Bears picked, a couple picks before them on day 3 to the Giants. I think that's a miss. Caleb Johnson went before them. Dylan Sampson went before them. All these running backs, went very soon before they were picked, and they had opportunities and they didn't get it. DeAndre Swift is fine, but I mean, Roschon Johnson so far hasn't panned out to what the Bears would have hoped for. So I'm curious to see if they're gonna sign Nick Chubb. I've heard a lot of rumors about them possibly going with Nick Chubb. Sign him to a 1-year, 2-year deal. I think that could be a solid filler for now. But I'm just surprised that they didn't try to go or be more aggressive in it in general because, Ben Johnson, he likes his running back duo, and he was the one that got rid of DeAndre Swift originally in Detroit. So I'm just surprised that they felt comfortable sticking with that. Not that it's a bad option. I do think DeAndre Swift is solid, and when there's good blocking, running backs are going to succeed, and they completely revamped the offensive line this offseason. But and not getting a defensive line help until Shamar Turner, I think, is also a pretty interesting decision. Going with tight end and wide receiver first was interesting. I mean, wide receiver is one of the deepest positions that the Bears have, and they just signed another guy when they already have players like Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, and then Cole Kmet at tight end. Cole Kmet is a very solid option. I think he's very underrated. If you look at the games, I mean, the offensive coaches that we had that were calling plays clearly didn't know how to use the players that they had, because when they used players like Cole Kmet, he was scoring touchdowns. He's a touchdown machine if you use him right. He knows how to block. He's literally the epitome of a tight end, and he wasn't used. The games that the Bears did win, he scored multiple touchdowns in. He was a monster, unstoppable. So I think he can be that with a offensive coach with an offensive play caller like Ben Johnson, so I'm surprised. 12 personnel, obviously, though, is where Ben Johnson likes to go. I'm curious to see how it looks. I'm really excited to see how the Bears' offense pans out, just because there's always so much hype around them, with them, arguably being off-season winners 3 years in a row. So I'm curious to see how that actually pans out for them this time, especially with the record, or especially with the schedule they have. It's a pretty tough schedule, especially being in a division with 3 other arguably top 10 teams. So I'm curious about it. But yeah, those are my top draft winners. To get into draft losers, the Vikings, I think, are number one. They only had 5 picks total, and they reached on Donovan Jackson in the first round. Obviously, I know they lost offensive line help this offseason, but there was one other offensive lineman available, and I just think they reached slightly. He's not a bad player, but just reached. And then they lost a lot of defensive help in the offseason as well, and they didn't do much to rectify that, and they didn't draft a defensive back. So with only 5 picks, there's only so much you could do. I just think they could have done better, maybe traded back, trying to get more picks. And then Saints as well are another team that I think didn't do the greatest in the draft. They drafted Tyler Schaff in the second round with pick 40. I think there's other quarterbacks that were available. I mean, obviously Shedeur Sanders fell to the 5th round. Tyler Schaff is 26 years old, and they need a quarterback-ready quarterback. I mean, I guess, with age, maybe he's more ready than others, but I think that was also an interesting option. I mean, this draft class in general was a little weak at quarterback compared to last year, especially. I think, if anything, they're more in a rebuild year with Kellen Moore at head coach. They also don't have a lot of cap space. So there's really not much they could have done in the offseason in general. I'm curious to see how the quarterback room pans out. It sounds like Derek Carr might be cut in the coming days. And then they got Spencer Rattler as well, so they don't have a lot of options at quarterback right now. I don't see them trading for Kirk Cousins with the cap hit. The Broncos were another team that I think had some questionable picks. I mean, they took Barron in the first round when they already have Patrick Surtain, and there's other needs. Amarian Hampton was still available to them at that point in time. They need another running back. They just lost Javonte Williams in the offseason. RJ Harvey was a decent pickup. I just think that overall in that first round, taking Barron instead of some other players was interesting. The defensive side of the ball is going to be even scarier for them. So, I mean, that's nice, but I just think I was questioning a little bit that first pick in the first round. Some of my favorite picks, though, were, Cam Skedebo in I think it was the 5th round he was taken by the Giants. For the Giants, pairing Skedebo up with Tyrone Tracy, I think, is going to make a monster duo. So that's really exciting to see. Cam Skedebo was one of my top rated running backs coming into the draft. He's really fun to watch. Super contact physical player. I also really liked Tet McMillan, for the Panthers at 8. He's one of the best wide receivers in the draft class, and I really liked the pick at 8. For whatever reason, I didn't see it coming. I figured they'd take defense, but getting a player like McMillan on offense for Bryce Young, who is still adjusting to the NFL, is taking strides to step forward. The only way you can help a quarterback like that is getting them more weapons, so I really liked that pick. Quinn Ewers as well. Quinn Ewers literally fell to the 7th round, the bottom of the 7th round, which I think is really interesting to me. I would have taken him over many of the quarterbacks that were drafted ahead of him. For the Dolphins, especially with Tua in question, I think that was a really solid pickup as well. I liked Xavier Watts, Andrew Makuba. I liked as well. And then, obviously, the other players that fell, Will Johnson, Jahad Campbell, Mike Green are all great picks, but these are just some of the other guys that fell to other teams, and I'm really liking some of these picks. Xavier Watts, as I mentioned, he was a major piece in Notre Dame's defense, leading them to the championship that they got to. He's all-pro first team, AP first team, I think, as well. So he's a really solid pickup for the Falcons, who already added to their defense in general with James Pierce and Jalen Walker in the first round. And getting Watts, who nearly fell to day 3, I think it was a really solid pickup. And I don't know if I mentioned him, but Trey Amos, he's a good solid cornerback pickup as well. He's a super speedy player, and bringing him into the Commanders' defense, I think just adds to the defensive skills. And bring a speedy cornerback like Trey Amos to the Commanders' defense, I think just, is a great addition to the team, especially in the round that they got him in. I liked Caleb Johnson for the Steelers as well at running back. They lost Najee Harris this year. Pairing him up with Warren, I think, is really solid, especially on that offense. And then, speaking of the Steelers, though, they just traded George Pickens, which I think is a really interesting decision. They just traded for DK Metcalf this offseason. I was super excited to see the pairing between the two, even though they are both a little bit divas. I just think that was a really interesting decision. They got a 3rd round pick, and then they swapped a couple picks with the Cowboys, so I just thought that was interesting. I would have at least waited a little bit, especially after the draft died down. I don't know where they're going to go. You want more than one receiver on a team, and DK is obviously the main receiver on the Steelers. They need some more help for that offense, I'd say for sure. That defense, they drafted Harmon in the 1st, so, that defense is stacked like always, but they definitely need some more help on that offensive side of the ball. And then for that quarterback discussion, I like the Browns picks the most, just with Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. Of course, Cam Ward was a great first overall pick. I wouldn't have taken any other quarterback there for sure. Jackson Dart being traded up in the 1st, I think it was a little high for him. Maybe he would have fallen to the 2nd round, but it's a solid pickup for the Giants. I'm really excited to see where he goes from there. Giants have an interesting quarterback room as well with Jameis Winston, Jackson Dart, and I'm blanking on the other one, but I'm excited to see that quarterback battle as well. I want to see who starts there. And then getting into my top 10, I have the Eagles at 1. Not much is changing for them. Not much change on the offense. The defense got better as well with Jahad Campbell in the 1st round. Just a couple free agency additions as well. They won the Super Bowl, so they're going to be number 1, of course. And then at 2, I have the Bills. Battle between the Bills and the Chiefs, of course, but Josh Allen's coming off a great year. I'm really liking where that team is going. And then the Chiefs I have at 3. They actually got better, I think, this offseason. They traded Joe Thuney away, and then they replaced him immediately with Josh Simmons and a couple other additions that they had. So they lost a bit, but they also definitely gained a lot there from that. And then at 4, I have the Ravens. At 5, I have the Lions. I'm just a little concerned for the Lions that they lost both their offensive and defensive play callers. Obviously, they still have the players. They still have Dan Campbell. But I'm curious to see how they jumpstart after losing both those key positions on that coaching staff. And then at 6, I have the Commanders. They've been improving this offseason. They went really far into the playoffs this year, or farther than I expected, for sure. They beat the Lions, of course, and everything. And then I have the Buccaneers at 7, Broncos at 8. I really like the Broncos. They made a couple additions on offense, which I really like. They brought in Evan Ingram for tight end, just another weapon for Bo Nix. And then I know Dre Greenlaw did have an injury, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be the full season at least. I mean, at the time, it was a really good addition, but I'm liking where they're at. I mean, obviously. And then drafting the cornerback in the first round, Barron, he's a really great player. I just think it was a little questionable, but obviously he still adds very much value to the Broncos defense. And then at 9, I have the Packers. They finally added a wide receiver in Matthew Golden, so maybe he can come out and be that number one option that the Packers need. And then at 10, I have the Chargers. They drafted a Marion Hampton, which I thought was a little questionable at first. They have other options. I would have gone wide receiver if I were them. But they are looking solid as well. So those are my top 10. I'll get more into it on both my social media pages over the offseason. I mean, we have all offseason to talk about this top 10, and it'll probably change very much so in the next few weeks even. So, I mean, even today, there's news of Gabe Davis got cut by the Jaguars after one season. George Pickens was traded. This top 10 is definitely going to change. This is just my initial opinion after the draft. And then finally, before I go, the NFL schedule releases May 14th, so I'm super excited to be able to talk about that. And then OTAs as they come in and get going. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.